This is a review of the topics we learned about in part 3 of the graphic design activity. So we learned about transform, and this property lets us make changes, a variety of changes to an element. So you can rotate it, and that's to turn it in a flat way, either clockwise or counterclockwise. Can scale it, so that changes the actual size, and it can either make it smaller or larger. If it's less than 1, that makes it smaller. If it's greater than 1, it makes it larger. Translate means to move the element from its original position. And so you can translate in the X or Y direction when you're using 2D transforms. And then skew is when you actually change the shape of an element, like you skew it up and down or sideways and make it look not its regular shape. There are also 3D transforms, and here we have a translate, but now we have the option to not only translate in the X and Y direction, but to translate in the Z direction. And so 3D transforms add this concept of a third axis, the Z axis, and that is either comes towards the viewer if it's a positive value or goes away from the viewer if it's a negative value. And we still have the translate and rotate, but now they can be X, Y, and Z. So we get those 3D transformations. Perspective is what we can use to be able to have the appearance of an object that it's receding from the viewer. And that gives the idea that it's further away, right? And it recedes into the distance. And that perspective is a 3D property. And what's interesting about it, the smaller the number, then it makes that change, it recedes more quickly, so the change is more drastic. And the bigger the number, then it recedes over a bigger distance, and so the change is less drastic. And another interesting thing about it is that it applies to the children of an element. So rather than wherever you put this on the style of an element, it doesn't apply to the element itself, but it applies to the children of that element. And we can learn about filters. There's a variety of filters that you can add to an element, and they change the look of it, right? Sepia, grayscale, saturate, and contrast are the ones that we use, but there's other ones too. And you add this filter and it applies. And the different values, you can say how much sepia you want, right? And how much saturation, how much contrast. So all of these have values that be able to apply the filter a little bit or a lot. And they really do change the look of the element. Then we learned about image maps, where you can create a map. Now this is all done in HTML, where you can create a map and it identifies different areas on that map. And then you can use those areas to link to different pages. So here's how you create an area. So the map itself has an opening and closing tag, and then inside the map tag are the area tags. And the area tags have several properties. They specify a shape, and it can be rectangular, circle, or poly, and the coordinates of that shape, right? And so this particular one is a rectangle, and it shows the opposite corners, and then the browser can create a rectangle from those two opposing points. And then it identifies where the link goes. So here's the href property that makes it a link, and this one's a local link, but it actually could be an external link as well. And then an alt that would go to identify some text to identify where that link is headed. So you can specify several areas in an image, and then you go to an image attribute, right? An image element, and you add the attribute use map. And then, so up here we had this use map that had a name, and then here we use the attribute use map on an image tag, and you identify what map to use. And it assigns that map to a specific image. And so pretty cool that you can identify different areas of map. It takes some time, right? We had to identify each area and the coordinates of each area. But then you can use those areas of an image to link.